What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing you guys another video. Today I'm bringing you guys a video on Lupinranger versus Patoranger, episode 34. This episode is called Legendary Gun, and the episode was pretty cool. It was actually a really good episode compared to a lot of recent episodes, and it introduces a very, very important Lupin collection item that will remain significant throughout the rest of the show, and we'll get into why that is throughout this episode, but it's not as evident in this episode as it will be in the next episode, why it will be meaningful. But I'll explain that later on. So anyway, let's get started. The episode starts off with us seeing that the Lupinrangers are heading out. They're, carrying some bags with some stuff or whatever. And the thing is that they end up having it where a kid throws a basketball that ends up going over towards where Kairi is, and Kairi ends up throwing it back to the kid. So then at that point, Kairi's looking over at the game, and Umeka and Toma are already going at this point, but Umeka goes over and says, "Kairi, do you like basketball?" And then he has this quick flashback of his memories of playing basketball when he was younger, and then he says, "Not really." Clearly he did like it, but there's some more story there as to why he says no. Clearly there was an incident or something that had happened that prevented him from liking it now. Most likely having to do with his brother. So anyway, what happens is that Kairi ends up going off with Umeka and Toma back to the base. Once they're back at the bistro, they end up finding that Goody's there, and Goody explains that Noelle went off to a secret hideout location where Arsène Lupin's favorite Lupin collection item was stored, and the thing is that he hasn't returned yet, and basically Goody wants them to go after it to find that Lupin collection item, because most likely he was affected by a trap or he got into trouble. So that's something that happens. Then what we do end up seeing is that at the Gangler base, we see Degranio and Destra and also Goche discussing things, because apparently there's this Gangler known as Cerberus, and Cerberus is a Gangler that likes to collect guns from humans. And so what happens is that Destra doesn't really understand the logic behind getting weapons from the humans, but the thing is that Goche explains that he's all about having fun, and that Destra doesn't really and that you have to understand how to have fun, really. And so then what happens is we end up seeing that Cerberus ends up destroying a building and coming out with some guns that he has, and he refers to the guns as cuties. It's a weird thing, but apparently he thinks of them as that rather than, like, say, a girl or something like that, which is much more common in Japanese culture. Just in general, you would imagine that it would be you'd be calling a girl or even a little kid a cutie versus a gun. A gun of all things would not typically be referred to as that. But Cerberus is actually based off of another Gangler that we saw in an earlier episode. He's basically a redesigned, remolded one. I forget the name of the Gangler right now, but it is something that you can note that they did take the same. They took a lot of the same molding from an earlier Gangler and just kind of reconfigured it for this one. And so the thing is that suddenly the Patorangers arrive on the scene and they end up fighting this Gangler, and this Gangler is pretty powerful. First of all, he's able to with his item control the earth to create like pull ground out of pull the ground up and make it so that he can have like this protective wall shielding him from any attacks. So what happens is that the Patorangers end up getting into a fight with him, and he ends up using his walls to protect him in battle. And what happens is that he also has another ability that his Lupin collection item allows him to do. I think the wall thing is less of his ability. It's more of like his own personal strength rather than something that comes from the Lupin collection item. Because the one that they say that actually comes from the Lupin collection item is that he's able to affect the oxygen. He's able to change the oxygen in the air, which allows him, since he's a gun wielder, to actually make it so that with the use of weapons that have gunpowder in them, since that's what most guns rely on, he's able to actually increase the strength to the point that it can lead to some insane power coming out of them because of the fact that he's able to adjust it so that the output is more powerful, since oxygen is a big component of gunpowder when it comes to actually shooting a gun. Again, I've never actually shot a gun myself, but just understand that right now that that's actually a key component of that. So what we end up seeing is that he uses that in battle, and eventually Cerberus, since he's kind of like a combination gangler, one that has like two heads to him, one that's the main head, and then there's one that's on his side, which is like this dog head that's able to sniff out other guns. And so he ends up sniffing out this really, really powerful gun that he goes after. And the Patorangers don't really understand why he calls them cuties. So then what we end up seeing in the meantime is that the Lupinrangers head off to the location of where this special Lupin collection item is that Arsène Lupin loved was. And the thing is that Goody is able to detect where certain traps are, so he does help them. Initially, there's one trap that goes off that is a huge boulder that's new, and apparently Goody's only been to this location. This is actually his second time going there, so he's only been there one other time, most likely with Arsène Lupin in the past. And so what happens is that trap happens, Goody gets like run over, but the other three don't. And then what happens is that they head down another path and they have to fight a knight, and that one they manage to defeat fairly easily. Following this, what happens is that they end up heading down to another location, which is where the item is, and this item is known as the Lupin Magnum, which is a pretty cool name. And the thing is that what they've been noticing as they've been walking down these hallways is that there's been these words on them, on the walls, and these words are all French words. And when you put them all together, it spells out "break the shackles." And so the thing is that when they view that message and they say it, suddenly they're all put into this illusion situation where they end up being in a location that resonates with their past and with the one that they lost. So the thing is that in Umika's case, she ends up seeing her friend that was frozen over and taken out in the past by Zamigo. And the thing is that they're in like a clothing shop and they're just talking casually, but Umika's like, this can't be real. Toma, on the other hand, is experiencing things from his home where he's cooking and his wife is there, which is weird for him, and he also finds this to be an illusion. And Kyrie's at a basketball court and he sees his brother and he knows it can't be real. So clearly each one of them is an illusion. At first their initial thoughts are, it's an illusion, maybe I could break the illusion by shooting around. I also forgot to mention that Noel is in the area. He is on the ground though, and the thing is that Goody is trying to wake him up, and what happens is that as they're trying to break the illusion, they realize what was the message. It said break the shackles. Who's the shackles in this case? Their loved ones. They have to break the shackles. The idea is that each of them mention how, I care more about you and you need to, enjoy your own dreams and not dream of rescuing me from what happened to me at this point. And the thing is that Umika really can't shoot her friend, and so can't Toma. And what happens is that both of them are knocked back. Now Noel is woken up at this point, prior to this, by Goody, and what happens is that he watches as they're there, and they're in the same illusion situation. But when Toma and Umika fall, it's clear to them that they must have failed the task that they had to complete. So they both fall over, and they're knocked out at this point. In the meantime, we end up seeing Kyrie's with his brother, and he's talking to him, and he finds that being a Lupinranger suits him well. Being a thief suits him, and you know, he's committed now, and he feels way more committed than anyone else does. And what happens is that he ends up actually transforming into his masquerade uniform, and then he actually shoots his brother in this illusion. That shows him breaking the shackles and him, you know, being truly committed to being a thief. And what happens is that at this point, suddenly Arsène Lupin appears, and also the casing around the Lupin Magnum disappears. And what happens is that Arsène Lupin says, "I entrust to you my most favorite weapon that I have, my most favorite Lupin collection item." And what happens is that, you know, Kyrie accepts it, and we briefly see Arsène Lupin, but we don't get to see his face. It's kind of like we see the face, but we don't see like all the facial features. We hear the voice and everything, but it's still not very clear as to who it actually is, and I'm looking forward to when that will eventually happen, hopefully. But anyway, Kyrie gets that. Then what we end up seeing is that suddenly the building starts falling down, and we end up seeing that Cerberus is outside, and he is waiting. He's looking around for the Lupin collection item that, or the gun that he's sniffing out. And the thing is that eventually Kyrie shoots the walls out so that they're able to escape. And what happens is that Cerberus sees the Lupin Magnum, and is like, ah, that's the cutie that I was looking for. And the thing is that Umika thinks he's referring to her, when in reality Noelle mentions, oh no, he must be talking about the Lupin Magnum, and so she's kind of embarrassed by that whole factor and is kind of confused. And then what happens is that the Lupinrangers end up trying to fight Cerberus, and what we do end up seeing is, I believe, some Portamen appear as well. And what happens is that they end up using their Kaito boost. They end up using the splash trigger machine, the the magic dial fighter. You know, Toma uses the magic one, and Umika uses the splash one. And then what we end up seeing is that Kyrie uses the Lupin Magnum, which is pretty cool. And they use their different abilities from the different boosts. And what happens is that eventually Kyrie is able to combine the Lupin Magnum in his basic form with the Versus Changer to allow him to perform the I think it was called Lupin Fever. And what happens is that he is able to twist the dial and then shoot off this big strike, that's called, and it does the finishing move that destroys the Gangler. And then what happens is that Goche appears, and she ends up making the Gangler big, and he's still after the Lupin Magnum. And what happens is that for some reason Noelle ends up giving them the X trains, even though in this episode we don't, like, he ends up giving Toma and Umika the X trains for some reason, which doesn't make any sense at all, because they don't even use Lupin Kaiser trains. They actually completely ignore that, and it's just sort of weird that they even gave it to them if they're not going to use it. You know, I think that was like an error on their filming part, but you know, it is what it is. And what happens is that from here we end up seeing the Lupinrangers you know, summon Lupin Kaiser, and what happens is that Noelle summons Ex-Emperor Slash, and they end up getting into a battle. And what happens is that first Noelle, you know, is using Ex-Emperor Slash, but then they realize, well, this is a gun battle, so maybe I should switch to my other form. So he transforms into Ex-Emperor Gunner, and he has like the Patoranger X form. And what happens is that he's fighting against this Gangler. Then what happens is that the Lupinrangers change the configuration of Lupin Kaiser into Lupin Kaiser Splash Magic. So that form is taken, and what happens is that at first, with the magic ability, which is something that I'm really loving, is the magic dial fighter, because of the fact that it allows them to do all sorts of different magic abilities. The first one allows them to summon a bone, which they throw out, and since like he has like this dog half to the Gangler, when he ends up going after it, he actually manages to get a bone, and it happens involuntarily because of the dog, not because of the actual body. I forgot to also mention that the Gangler's Lupin collection item, it was the Tensoder, which was from Ghost Sager. That was the main changer from the season. Just wanted to mention that because I do manage to get that. But anyway, what happens is that they first do the bone, then what happens is that they use another ability, which is allowing Kairi to be summoned, and Kairi ends up using the Versus Changer and the Lupin Magnum for a finisher that goes off and destroys the Ganglers, like a Trickster Big Strike finish or something like that, I think it was called. And it was this big attack that involved those two weapons blasting off and destroying the Gangler. So that's very cool. What we do end up seeing is that back at the base, Kagori ends up hearing about how Kairi managed to get the Lupin Magnum and that Artisan Lupin entrusted it to him, and Kairi asks if he can actually keep it, and Kagori says yes, you can definitely keep it. So then at that point, Kagori ends up heading off, and what happens is that Umika wants to try out the Lupin Magnum, but like Kairi doesn't want her to, and then we end up hearing from Toma and Noelle, and the thing is that Toma mentioned, so I guess you weren't able to, you know, break your shackles, and the thing is that Noelle says, well, I'm weak to some things, basically, he says. And the thing is that we end up seeing that Kagori is outside the building. He can't believe the fact that that Kairi was the one that got the Lupin Magnum, and he says Kairi is truly a talent of his, which is interesting because it kind of makes you think almost that maybe Artisan Lupin is Kagori, or if something else is going on there, like, you know, what's the whole story there, because clearly Kagori has more going on that we really don't know yet, but it is interesting. So anyway, that's about it for this episode. The preview looks pretty cool. What we are going to see in the preview is that apparently in the next episode, Kagori will be split into multiples of himself with different personalities. Like, some will be more wild, some will be more tame, but just in general, he'll have these different forms. And the thing is that if he doesn't get back together with all of his forms into one, he'll die. And so the idea is that they have to go and try to get all the Kagoris back together so that he becomes one and so he doesn't die. Also, what we do end up seeing a number of times in the preview is that they are going to be using the Lupin Magnum's robot mode, because yes, Lupin Magnum actually does have a robot mode that is its own mecha. If you're wondering if there's other forms to Lupin Magnum, yes, there is. Lupin Magnum will actually have at least one other form to it that we know of so far, which is Lupin Magnum Superior, which is a form that actually has it where the arms are swapped out for the Lupin, for the blue dial fighter and the yellow dial fighter. So that will happen eventually. I don't know when. It should happen relatively soon. I would imagine in maybe 2 weeks, if not a little later than that. But that will be interesting to see. The main reason why I say 2 weeks is because next week they'll be doing Lupin Magnum in his robot mode, so the following week would make a lot of sense. As far as whether or not the other auxiliary ones can be used, like Magic, Splash, or any of the other ones, I don't know yet. We'll have to wait and see if they can actually combine, but we do know at least that blue and yellow will be able to. And what that also likely means is that if Lupin Magnum exists like that, I'm curious if it can function on its own or if Kairi has to be in use of it. What that also could mean is that we'll actually be seeing 3 mecha battles, meaning that we'll have Lupin Magnum, Lupin Kaiser, and X-Emperor. But they're also going to be introducing the Victory Striker very soon in October, which will be another kind of good striker that will be used, which will allow another form. So in other words, what could happen is that they could have 4 mechas in battle. They could have Pat Kaiser, Lupin Magnum, the Victory Striker combination, and X-Emperor all in battle at once. So that could happen, but again, we have to wait and see what does end up occurring. Overall, though, I thought this episode was good, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing Lupin Magnum's robot mode next episode. But that's about it for me, guys. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 1, and goodbye, guys.